Thank you so much for that, Tanya. Towards the end, they were saying a glorious opportunity, and we now have a glorious opportunity to hear from Mr. Joseph Thomas McKellar. I'm so excited to have Thomas joining us. He's joining us from Los Angeles, and he's the Executive Director of the Pacific Institute for Community Organizing, PICO, which is the umbrella organization of Faith in Action Bay Area, who we are very involved with, and Nanny Friedman spoke here in the fall, and we are one of our Share the Plate recipients. And Mr. McKellar leads a statewide network of 16 faith-based multicultural community organizations in 24 counties, representing 400 congregations and 450,000 families across California, which include Faith in Action Bay Area. He has been a community organizer for a long time. He is talented, he is inspirational, and I'm so excited that Mr. McKellar could join us today. So, PICO can stand for many things. It could stand for Pacific Institute for Community Organizing, but some people say it's people improving communities through organizing. People improving communities through organizing, and this is what we are doing with Faith in Action Bay Areas, looking at the evictions, which are coming up in March 31st. Is the end of the eviction moratorium there, and Faith in Action are one of the leaders who we're working with to try and get that extended. But I'm just so happy that Joseph's joining us today. So welcome, Joseph. Thank you so much for being with us, and I'm so honored to have you join us today.
Great. Well, thank you so much. You all can hear me okay? I couldn't make it on for the sound check. Okay. Thanks be to God. Well, saludos, mis queridas hermanas y hermanos, my dear siblings of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Redwood City and the Unitarian Universalist of San Mateo. It is my honor and a gift to be in community with you this morning. I'm so grateful to Reverend Ben and Reverend Brian for the invitation to offer a few reflections during this morning's service. Reverend Ben and Reverend Brian shared with me about the journey all of you are on to restore and renew one another and the world around you. And I just have to say that your faithful commitment to building people power with the community organization Faith in Action Bay Area and with our state network, PICO, California, is such a ray of light in the midst of the darkness that defines much of our time. These years of pandemic have been difficult for so many of us. The upheaval in the world around us has caused upheaval in our own lives. And everything around us is calling out for restoration. After 2 years of pandemic, racial reckoning, growing economic insecurity, mental health challenges, and widespread indifference to the suffering of our neighbors. For many of us, I know for me at times, it's been hard to snap out of it. I recently heard this term, the COVID haze. And what I would like to offer this morning are my meditations on what will help us find ourselves and each other in these difficult days. Because I believe this world, this broken world, needs us. It needs you. And I believe we are called to 3 things that will help us snap out of it and become the source of restoration that Reverend Ben and Reverend Brian speak of. I think we're called to proximity, we are called to belonging, and we are called to justice. Almost 3 years ago to the day, I was invited to a conference at the Vatican on migrants and refugees. And for 3 days, I met with 200 community organizers and ministers from all around the world, from different faith traditions, who are developing new strategies to accompany migrants and refugees at a time of increasing xenophobia around the globe. And on the 3rd day, Pope Francis himself met with our group to hear our recommendations for welcoming, protecting, promoting, and integrating migrants and refugees into our communities. And after the Pope's speech, each one of the 200 delegates was invited to meet Pope Francis one-to-one. And we waited in line as delegates shook Pope Francis's hand. And when my turn came, I approached the Pope and I said, "Hola, Padre Jorge." It means, "Hello, Father Jorge." And Pope Francis kind of looked at me and he sort of pointed at me with a sly look on his face. Probably because nobody calls him by the name he went by as a church pastor in Argentina. But I had read a book about Pope Francis, which said that when he was Archbishop of Buenos Aires, he preferred not to be called Your Excellency or Cardinal Bergoglio, but by the humble name Padre Jorge as a church pastor. And I gave him an image of a fresco that's painted on one of the walls of my church here in Los Angeles, Dolores Mission. And I share with you a little image. Apologies for the smallness of this, but you can see here that this is an image at my church that depicts Mary and Jesus as a migrant mother and baby, leaving their pueblo in Latin America for El Norte, heading to Los Angeles. And here at the bottom, you can see there are rocks in the road ahead, symbolizing the many hardships and sufferings that she and her baby will endure as they struggle to make a new life here. But despite those rocks, she holds her head high, dignified as a child of God. And Pope Francis seemed genuinely appreciative. And after telling him about PICO, California, and our work for justice in our communities, I asked him in Spanish, Padre Jorge, what words of encouragement from you can I share with the people of PICO who every day are accompanying the most excluded and suffering people of our state, the incarcerated, the formerly incarcerated, immigrants, people experiencing houselessness? And without hesitation, Pope Francis leaned in and he pointed at my chest and he said, Quédate con el pueblo, which means stay with the people. And he said it again, Quédate con el pueblo. And he said, listen to what the people of the community are yearning for and allow them to teach you, but stay close to the people. He said it a third time, Quédate con el pueblo. Who is el pueblo? Who is your pueblo? God calls us to keep expanding our answer to that question. We are called to widen our circle of human concern. In some ways, everyone is my pueblo, but my pueblo is in a particular and special way those who are hurting most, those who are told they don't belong. My father says that a parent is only as happy as their least happy child. We suffer when those we love suffer. We place ourselves in the storm of people's lives to get close to them, not just to help, but so that they can change us. Who is your pueblo? Who in your life are you being called to get closer to listen deeply to understand better, to suspend judgment about, to open your heart to, and to overcome your fear of? Each of us deeply wants to belong. We all yearn for spaces where we can experience unity, being in one place together. It is part of human nature. We are being ripped apart as a country, as a people. We hear a dominant story that says we are safer the more segregated we are from one another. The message is that we do not belong to one another. That some people, because of their black or brown skin, because of their country of origin, because of their religion or sexual orientation, are the enemy. They are to be feared. They are to be excluded. And those anxieties are being exploited for political gain. We are called to proximity. We are called to belonging. You know, I come from a big Mexican Catholic family. And in the days leading to Christmas a few years ago, my mother, Olga, invited some of my cousins, aunts and uncles, my sister, my wife, and me over to her home to make tamales from my abuelita's recipe. My mother felt it was something that our family needed to do because a few months earlier, my younger brother, Mateo, had been arrested and convicted of a drug-related crime. And he was incarcerated at Men's Central Jail in Santa Ana. My brother Mateo had struggled with the illness of substance addiction for over a decade. And so here we were, all of my family members feeling sorrow over the absence of my incarcerated brother, in my mother's kitchen a few days before Christmas to make tamales from scratch. My parents put 2 tables together in the kitchen to form an assembly line. And at some point, my mother paused to look up at the tamal assembly line, and she saw each of our aprons and shirts and hands covered in masa, standing on a floor with food scraps and pieces of corn husk everywhere. And her eyes welled up with tears. And through deep pain and heartache, with her voice cracking, my mom said, "Familia, look at us. We are messy, but we are together. Messy, but together. And that's all that matters." Now, PICO is a messy institution full of messy people. Maybe the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Redwood City, the Unitarian Universalists of San Mateo are the same. Our places of work, our families, our public institutions are also full of messy, complex, often broken people. We carry unconscious biases about people who are different from us that shape how we interact with the world. We hold contradictory views sometimes on race, on the economy, on politics, on theology. We are not so much woke as we are still waking, all on a journey to become better, more expansive, more generous versions of ourselves. Our hope for a reborn Bay Area in California that is rooted in equity and interdependence and kinship reside in our ability to be both messy and together. I've come to believe that we must learn to build bridges with others who are messy, because it is through the transformational energy of relationships and encounter that we achieve the revolution of our own human hearts and the possibility for social change fueled by organized love. We are called to draw near to those who are hurting most, to exchange stories of sorrow and hope, place ourselves in the midst of the storms of each other's lives, and to walk a path of public action that demands change. For me, part of what makes PICO such a holy place is it's a place for us to be together in all of our messiness, with all the burdens and challenges and fears we bring with us each week. We are messy, but we're together, and we're building a prophetic movement with enough power to give birth to a new California. And in my mom's words, that's what matters most. My friends, the only way forward is together. The only way forward is together. In a reborn California, people of faith and spirit would be gathering again in homes and houses of worship. They would be sharing their stories and seeing themselves reflected in the other. They would go out, listen, learn, and move in public life with others, demanding with a fierce and determined love for a rebirth that all of those living on the peripheries today are longing for. We're called to proximity, we're called to belonging, and we are called to justice. California's story today is the tale of 2 states. It's the tale of much of the Bay Area where most of you live and make your home. These last 2 years of pandemic in California have pushed us past many points of reckoning. In California, the chasm between rich and poor continues to deepen. Today, more than 1 out of every 3 Californians are living at or near poverty. That's just $36,000 per year for a family of 4. More than 1 in 5 of those living in poverty are Latino, and 1 in 5 are African American. The poverty rate is just 1 out of every 10 for white Californians. In California, white families have 10 times more wealth than families of color. 20% of all net worth is concentrated in the 30 wealthiest zip codes, home to just 2% of Californians. Although the Black population is 6% in California, our Black siblings make up 29% of the state's prison population. For every 100 poor renters, there are only 23 affordable and available rental units. 1 in 4 Black and Latino renters reported hardships paying rent during the pandemic. The number was 1 in 10 for white renters. For all of California's blue-collar politics and progressive values, something is deeply broken about our economy that profits off of vast human suffering. The melanin levels in our skin still determine what privileges we enjoy and what burdens we're forced to carry throughout our lives. My question for you is, what do you imagine a reborn Bay Area, a reborn California, a reborn America looks like? What do you see when you think of rebirth rooted in justice? As I close, let me just for a moment share with you what I see. In a reborn California, we would wage war not on the poor, but rather on poverty. In a reborn California, we put the economy in service to people rather than making people slaves to overwork, overproduction, and exploitation. In a reborn California, we would love Mother Earth by creating a new economy that ushers in a green revolution and ends the vicious cycle of fires, smoky air, drought, and life-ending heat. We will see a criminal justice system rooted in mercy, healing, and redemption rather than punishment and retribution. We will see housing prices no longer driven by the speculative market, but rather social housing developments that guarantee a roof over every head, a dignified home for every human being. We would see affordable, human-centered healthcare, mental health, and elder care as universal human rights. We'd see the right to vote extended to every Californian because they're human. And we'd stop denying this sacred right because of what country they're born in or what their criminal record says. My friends, you are the midwives of this California. But this California will not be born again if it is not first born in the recesses of our human hearts. Dorothy Day once said that the greatest revolution is the revolution of the human heart. It's there that we answer the questions, who matters and who belongs. The poet Rumi once wrote, "Yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise, so I'm changing myself." It's in the heart that we find the courage to become more proximate to others who are suffering. It's in the heart where we discover who we are in God and who God is in us. Let me close with the words of another great prophet, the late Uruguayan author Eduardo Galeano, who from somewhere beyond shares with us today his answer to the question, what does a reborn world look like? The despairing shall be paired and the lost shall be found, for they are the ones who despaired and lost their way from so much lonely seeking. We shall be compatriots and contemporaries for all who have a yearning for justice and beauty, no matter where they were born or where they lived, because the borders of geography and time shall cease to exist. Perfection shall remain the boring privilege of the gods, while in our bungling, messy world, every night shall be lived as if it were the last, and every day as if it were the first. Let us go forth and become proximate to the suffering of others. Let us build bridges of solidarity and belonging. And let us, through the light of our faith, sow seeds of love and justice, messy and together.